Hi there, thanks for joining me today. I'm Jackie, and today I have a project for you that's a little bit different. Really quick and simple. I'm going to show you how to make this little greeting card with a lighthouse on it and another little greeting card with a sailboat on it. Hopefully it'll give you some new ideas of something you can do with your sea glass. If you've seen my last few videos, you've seen me create very large sea glass mosaics. And sometimes when I'm working large, when I finish a large project, I say, okay, I gotta work small, do something really quick and simple. So that's why I got into doing a few greeting cards, because I love having greeting cards to give to people. You know, it's really nice to give something homemade, and when you have some sea glass on hand, it's really easy to make some nice, sweet little greeting cards. And although I love to work with sea glass, I also work with fabric, and I like to make fabric wall hangings like the one you see behind me here of the heron. And so doing something that combines my love of fabric with my love of sea glass is a lot of fun for me. So if you want to see any of my other videos that I've done that combine my love of sea glass with my love of fabric, you can click on the playlist up above and you can go and watch those. So today we're making a little lighthouse and a little sailboat. So come join me for this one. So first of all, what do you need to complete these sweet little cards? I will put a list of materials in the description down below, which you can refer to if that's helpful. So the first thing you need is to find some of these little photo cards. They're cards that have an opening, which is where we're going to have our little piece of fabric sea glass art. And these ones that I have also have a card to put on the background. That just provides a back for the little fabric sea glass piece. And then they're just blank cards. You can write whatever you want. So I have a rectangular one there for my lighthouse and an oval one for my sailboat. And then I've cut 2 pieces of felt. The felt that I've cut here is 4 inches by 5 inches. So you would cut whatever size you need for the card that you have. And then I've taken a piece of blue fabric, 3 inches by 5 inches, and brown fabric for the sand here for my lighthouse piece. And I have blue fabric, 3 inches by 4 inches, or 3.5 inches by 4 inches, and 3.5 inches by 4 inches of blue for the water for my sailboat. And I also have for my lighthouse, I have some white kind of thick thread here to make these bubbles in the sand. I'll show you how to make those French knots. And I also have my sea glass pieces for both pieces. I've got a piece of pottery for the sail, some sea glass for the flag and the hull of the boat. I've got some beads. And then for this one, my lighthouse, I have my sea glass that I need. I've got some beads. I have some yarn to make these grasses. And that's about all I need. Then you need your thread and your sewing machine and all of your basic sewing materials. And we'll get started. I'll show you what I do to sew these. The next step is to do a little bit of sewing on this. So I've taken this over to my sewing machine. I have the brown fabric on top of the blue fabric. This is for the lighthouse. I have brown thread in my machine, and I'm just going to do a line of sewing right across to attach the 2 pieces of fabric onto the piece of felt. So that's just a straight line across. Now I want to do some lines in the sand here, and I'm going to do free motion for that. So I want to change my foot from my regular foot to my free motion foot. So now I have my free motion foot on, and I'm just going to make some wavy lines back and forth because I like to have the lines in the sand. If you want to do these straight instead of wavy lines, that's fine. Whatever works for you. Maybe you're not much of a free motion quilter. I love to free motion quilt, so I could sit here and do And that's all the sewing I'm going to do. I'm not going to do any sewing in the sky because I kind of like the sky flat without any stitch lines in it. So now to do the background for the lighthouse. So I have to change my thread from brown to blue because I want to have blue thread in the water here. So now to do the background for my sailboat, I've changed my thread to blue thread and I've put my regular foot back in my machine. I'm just going to do that straight line across to attach the two pieces of fabric to the piece of felt. So now I'm going to use free motion quilting to make all sorts of wavy lines and waves in the water. This is just the way I prefer to do it. I find it just adds so much to have nice wavy stitch lines. But you don't need to do that. You can do whatever you like. So there you go. That's all I'm going to do for sewing on that one. I'm going to leave the sky blank as like I did with the other one. So now I trimmed my little backgrounds to 3 1/4 inches by 4 1/4 inches because I just want them big enough to show through the hole. I don't want them too big. So you can measure the size of the opening that you have in your cards to determine what size you want to trim it to. I just find it easier to work with for sewing if it's bigger. Now, to start with the lighthouse, I want to sew on 3 pieces of yarn to make these 3 grasses over in the side. So I just take a piece of yarn. I have my needle and thread here with brown thread, and I just couch it on. So it's just sewing back and forth all the way up the piece of yarn to sew that on. I love doing handwork, so this is very relaxing for me. You can sew this on by machine. I often do couch things on by machine. But for the purposes of this piece, I wanted to sew it on by hand. So I have those 3 strands of grass sewed on. I'll just trim that. And now I want to add a few little beads for or just bits of grass in the sand here. I love beading, and I just find you don't need that many beads, and it doesn't take long to sew a few on, and it just adds a tiny little sparkle. I like a little sparkle. And for something like this, it's a card. A person may take this card and put it on their mantle or on their table and look at it for a bit, but it's not meant to last forever. It's just a way to send some love to somebody, some good wishes. So there, I just did a longer bugle bead and a couple of smaller beads beside it, and it looks like a little tuft of grass. And I'm going to do 3 of those. So the other thing that I want to do here is add a few tiny little brown beads to the grass, just because it adds a little bit more sparkle to the grass. And you know what it's like when somebody's looking at something? It can be really interesting when they just have to look a tiny bit closer to get that little extra detail. So that's what this is. It's that little extra detail that somebody may not notice, but if they're really attentive, they will. And it's to me, it's worth the few extra minutes it takes to sew on a few extra beads. So that's the background for my lighthouse. Now for my sailboat, what I want to do here, I want to make these nice big bubbles in the water. And so what I'm going to make are French knots, and you may have made French knots before, which is where you pull your thread through, you do loop around your needle 3 times, and then push it back in. But because I want these knots to be loose, I'm not going to pull that loop very tight. And then I get this kind of loopy bit, which I really like. I love doing that in water, because to me it looks like the water is splashing up. Looks like splashes when you've got you know, when the waves are churning up the water. So I'm just going to do a few of these in the water to add a little bit more interest to my sailboat. So, still loving that sparkle that I get with beads. I have a few clear bugle beads here. They're those kind of skinny beads. And just a few of those in the water. They're not even that noticeable, but when the light catches them, they add a bit of a shimmer, and I love that. So I am going to sew a few of those on just to add a little bit more interest to my sailboat card. So there you go, I have the little backgrounds all done. So before I put the sea glass on, which is of course the best part, I'm going to put the backgrounds into my cards because then I don't have to worry about messing up the sea glass once it goes in. So what I'm doing here, I'm just taking a glue stick. You might have other ideas of how to put this in, but this is what works for me. I'm just putting the glue stick onto the cardboard, or the cardstock, I guess it is. Just put that on. It stays in place pretty good. Then I line it up in here, like so. And I'm just going to tape that in place using my tape. If you have some better ideas, because I tend to work with fabric and with sea glass, not as good with card stuff. If you're a card maker and you have better suggestion on how to do this, please post a comment in the comment section down below. Personally, I would really appreciate it because I find this is not necessarily a permanent fix. In order for this to stay in, I would then have to put it into a frame. But if you know how I could do this more efficiently and effectively, please let me know, and I'm sure the other viewers of this video would appreciate it as well. So now for the really fun part, putting on the sea glass. So I'm using my Quick Seal Kitchen and Bath Adhesive Caulk. This is what I use for all my sea glass, and it works well on fabric, on glass, on driftwood. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put my sea glass in place. I'll do the lighthouse first. So I have the structure of the lighthouse with a green piece of sea glass. I have a tiny little white triangle, or rectangle rather, that I'm putting on top of that to make a door. A tiny little blue for a window. My brown triangular roof. And there's my lighthouse. And then I have a little shell that I want to add down here in the sand by the grasses. Super quick. And my sail, I have this great triangular piece of white sea pottery that to me looks so much like a sail. I just love the way it's kind of curved at the bottom. So that's a perfect piece for a sailboat. And then I have a brown piece of sea glass for the boat itself, and just a tiny blue piece for a flag on top of the sail. So there you have it. I have these sweet little greeting cards. They flip open. I'm not going to flip that one because it still has to dry. Flip open, write your note. These ones come with their own envelopes, so they each have an envelope to accompany it. And then when I have somebody that I want to send a little note to, or send them a greeting for a special occasion, I can just grab one of these because I find people love to get homemade notes and homemade cards. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I have another one for you that's also using fabric along with my sea glass for my next video, and it's a little bit different, a few more steps, a little bit more complicated than this one, but be sure to join me for that one. And until next time, I hope you make it to the beach, and happy sea glass hunting.